That's the deal, God is with us when we're here and life is going good, and He's with us when we're down here, and it doesn't feel like He would be with us, but He is just with us. He's with us. He's with us. There's the truth of that song. It's the truth of that song of I Need You. And so last week we were entered into this story of Ruth. There's just 4 very short chapters in the Old Testament, right after the book of Judges, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more next week. And so there's just this beautiful story, but yet it's a real hard story. So I want to start actually on the back of your outline. If you've got your New Hope notes in that, you can flip it over. And I want to start off our story today with talking about the animated movie Up. How many of you are familiar with the animated movie Up? It came out 4 or 5 years ago. I remember the first time that I saw Up, we actually went to a movie theater, the Holiday Cinema up here. And I remember the theater that we were in, and I was sitting next to my son, who served as a Marine for 5 years, and I think it was maybe after his first deployment, maybe after his second deployment, and we just decided that we're going to go see this animated movie. We'd seen the advertisements, maybe seen previews, and we used to go to all the Disney movies when he was smaller, and so even though he's a war-hardened veteran now, a Marine, we went and saw this animated movie Up, and I remember just getting caught in the opening minutes of the movie. I think there's like 4 minutes that goes by, and then there's another 4 minutes that at the end of the 4 minutes, I was going to show the 4 minutes, but I can't show it without crying. And so I just thought, I'm not going to show those 4 minutes. But those 4 minutes that shows Ellie and Carl when they get married. And then they start their life off, and he's going to be a balloon salesman, and she's going to be a partner with her. And they got these dreams. They've got these dreams that they will go one day to Paradise Falls, in the spirit of adventure. And so it starts to chronicle their married lives together. They fix up this old ramshackle house that used to kind of be their club when they were real small and had first met. And then they start having these dreams together. They start saving, but there'd be some kind of catastrophe that happened, and they would have to dig into their savings for Paradise Falls. And then the years keep going by. They go up on a hill, and they have a picnic, and they kind of lay back and they're watching the clouds, and they see some images in the clouds, and then like a few years go by, and they go back up and they see some more images. Carl, he sees one baby that he says in the cloud. In the end, this was all without words, and then she sees lots of babies in the clouds, and then they're fixing up a baby room in their house, and it changes to a scene. She's not going to be able to have any babies. So then it just keeps going, years go by, and he finally saves enough, and he gets tickets to go to South America. And then they show a scene where he's leaving church. Ellie is dead. So I'm sitting next to my Marine son. I'm okay. You okay? And again, the rest of the story. A wonderful, entertaining movie. But those 4 minutes, like I said, I watched it a couple of times this week, borrowed the DVD from someone and thought, should I show it? And you think I'm messed up now after watching it. And I didn't want to get you all messed up either. So again, there's something about a movie sometimes that they're just so carefully crafted to set us up. Do you like that? The setup of Up? I laughed about that all week long when I put that together. The crafted setup of the movie Up. So again, last week we were talking about just how carefully crafted the writer of the book of Ruth crafts the story. Last week we made, we just look at the first 5 verses, and there's 2 references right away in the first 5 verses to the city of Bethlehem. And again, we all just sang, little town of Bethlehem a couple of months ago. So we know Bethlehem. The author of the writer of Ruth just wants us to make sure that it's in Bethlehem. In fact, today we're going to see that Bethlehem is mentioned 3 more times in the first chapter. Again, the author really wants us to know that it happened in Bethlehem. And it's 1,000 years before the event that we sing about at Christmas happens. So he wants us to know that it happens in Bethlehem. Next week, and I've never seen this before, but I'm going to warn you up front, and so again, you can decide right now whether you want to come back next week. Next week, I'm going to wreck Bethlehem for you. Actually, I'm not going to wreck it. The Bible is. I was reading some passages in the Bible, and Bethlehem, right before this story is probably told, whew. So it messed me up this week, and so I'm going to mess you up next week. But it's in Bethlehem, and again, that's part of the big part of this story. We also know that very, very much the author wants us to know that this family leaves Bethlehem because there's a famine in the land. When you go out of the little village of Bethlehem into the little areas around where they're growing crops and that, there's been a famine in these land. The little fields aren't producing. And so they leave and go over into this foreign country of Moab because they want to live. They want to go over and live, and so they're going to go over and work and get some, be able to harvest the food that's over there and to sow and plant the food, and so they want to live. This husband, this wife, and these two sons. But in those first 5 verses, we read that the husband dies. The two sons take wives, Moabite wives. Again, they're Jews. They're from Israel. They're from Bethlehem. They shouldn't have done that, but they do. And those two sons die, and now there's these two daughter-in-laws that are widows, along with the mother-in-law who is a widow. And the other thing that this author of Ruth wants to make known to us over and over again is not to forget that Ruth is a Moabitess. In fact, in other places in the Bible where Ruth is mentioned, it's oftentimes mentioned that she is a Moabitess. Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess. Don't forget, Ruth is from the Moab. She's not a Jew. She's not someone who is really chosen, but she's involved in the chosen story. But she's really not one of God's people. But she's in God's story, and she is one of God's people. But the Bible always seems to be reminding us of it, that there are people in the story that are chosen that, according to the Israelites, they wouldn't have been chosen. Like, really, none of us in this room would have been chosen, but we know that we're in God's story. We've been chosen to be in God's story. There's something bigger happening here than who we are or what we are. God is doing something bigger. And oftentimes we want to return that favor to others, that we think, we're in the story, but others aren't in the story. There are people that are unlike us, that they're really not in the story. But God, as he writes our story, as he writes other stories, he always has just this matter. He wants to include people more than he wants to exclude them. Again, it's hard for us to imagine that what we're going to see here this morning when it comes to Ruth, that God would do something for her that in some ways he doesn't do sometimes for his own chosen people. But we'll get to that in a few moments. So I want to read verses 6 through 13 of chapter 1. We'll read this rather quickly. It says, she arose, talking about Naomi, the widowed mother, the mother-in-law, with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. And so again, Moab twice. Naomi has been out working in the fields of Moab, but she hears, because there's migrant workers back then, just as there are migrant workers today. So some migrant workers must have come over at this harvest time in Moab, and she hears that now back in Bethlehem, the fields are producing again. And so she decides that she's going to go back to Bethlehem. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, because again, they're connected. There's this relationship. And they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, go return each one of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. So they don't have husband now, but maybe someone from Moab, some man will marry you. again, these two daughters-in-laws probably aren't that old at this point. Maybe they're 17, 18, 19, 20. You know, oftentimes they're getting married at 15, 16. The husbands die. We don't know exactly when. We don't know why. And so they're not that old. And there's a sense that maybe we were kind of speculating about this last week too, that maybe Naomi's not even all that old. You know, as soon as we hear that someone's husband died, we just kind of automatically assume that, gosh, they probably are in their 50s or 60s or maybe in their 70s. What if Naomi was only 35? What if she was only 30? If she got married at 15, 16, had two sons over the next couple of years. Those two sons got married when they were 15, 16. They ended up dying at some point. That maybe she's not all that old. Then we're kind of going to get a clue, a hint of that's a possibility as we read on here. And so then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return to your people." But Naomi said, "No, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they might become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons a year from now and 2 years from now, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." So there's a sense that if she's in her mid-30s and she got married, she could have some sons. And again, I don't understand all this and how this would work out, but maybe those, you know, they would, I don't know. It's one of those kind of weird things sometimes about the Old Testament. But it doesn't seem like it's completely out of the realm of possibilities. Why would she even mention it? So, we're going to read on now, and this is what I've got printed in your New Hope notes, verses 14 to 22. So they lifted up their voices and wept again, and then Orpah, again, we made a big deal of this last week. It's Orpah, not Oprah. Oprah is not in the Bible. She's everywhere else, but she's not in the Bible. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And Naomi said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." Now, Ruth, the author's going to put some words in the lips of Ruth that is just a bold and beautiful statement of faith in the one true God. Again, the author wants to make sure, and a number of other authors throughout the scriptures, when they'll say Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the Moabitess, that most time people that are familiar with the Bible, as they have become familiar with the Bible over the years, whenever they hear the name Ruth, they think of her bold and beautiful statement of faith. This bold and beautiful statement of faith comes from Ruth, the Moabitess. I mean, there are some other Jews and some of those chosen people and some of the heroes of the faith and that know that, you know, they give express to faith, but that it comes from Ruth. Again, it'd be like us imagining, Ahmed from Iraq, that he would give some really beautiful expression of faith. It would be hard for us to kind of receive it because we just don't think of a lot of those people being followers of Jesus. It's kind of what is happening here. The Bible wants to make it clear that she's from Moabite. She's a Moabitess. She's a Moabitess. She's a Moabitess. But from her comes this statement of faith that sometimes makes the statement of faith of those chosen people seem rather inept. So here's what Ruth says. "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you." And here it is. "For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Even if your people don't want to be my people. Even if people think that your God can't be my God. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. It's an amazing statement of faith from the Moabitess. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. She realized that somehow something is in Ruth that's not coming out of her. So I put in the outline here, the title of this message is Faith to Go Before the Turn. So the faith to go. Ruth is making this bold and beautiful statement of faith, this confession in the one true God of Israel. Before the turn. And we're going to get to the turn in we can look at it real quick. It's in verse 22. All the Bible scholars tell us that the last thing, it says the last sentence of verse 22, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. That's the turn of the story. That, there's the husband dies, the two sons die, the one daughter-in-law goes back, but Ruth comes and they come into Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. And the authors say, the scholars say that's a turn in the story, that somehow there's a positive note at the end of chapter 1. But Ruth has faith before this turn happens. And again, even when that turn happens, it's not much of a turn. We will read in chapters 2 and 3 how Ruth has to go out and work. And it kind of seems like Naomi has gotten into a weakened condition. She's not able to go out into the harvest fields, but Ruth is still this young, vibrant woman, and she goes out and she works hard and brings back lots and lots of food. That's going to sustain them for many months. And then, there's more of the story turning, but there's the turn that come back at the beginning of the barley harvest. So again, this Ruth the Moabitess makes this bold and beautiful statement of faith before the turn. And before the turn, Naomi also has some words that are recorded in Ruth. And again, I think the author of Ruth doesn't want us to miss kind of the contrast of what comes out of the lips of Ruth and what comes out of the lips of Naomi, one of the chosen. Naomi knows the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. She's a part of that. She knows the story of Moses and the people of Israel coming out of. She knows the story of Joshua when they came into. She knows how Bethlehem got settled. She knows all those stories, all the faith in this one true God. But from her lips comes also a bold statement. There's not a lot of beauty to it. Actually, I think there's a lot of brutalness to it. She's going to give a bold statement of blame. And she points it in one direction. And the author wants to make sure that we get exactly what it is that Naomi is saying. One of the chosen people. So we read here, beginning verse 19. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. Again, there's the third reference to Bethlehem in chapter 1. And when they came to Bethlehem, there's the fourth. We want to make sure we know where we're going to be. The whole town was stirred because of them, and the women said, "Is this Naomi?" They remember when she was a little girl, when she went away at 15, 16, 17 years old with her husband, and how they were full of life, and they were going to go off to Moab and make a living there. And she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi." Naomi in the Hebrew, usually the footnotes in your Bible, if you read this, it means pleasant. Pleasant. She says, "Call me Mara." Again, oftentimes in your footnotes of your Bible, the word Mara in Hebrew means bitter. Don't call me pleasant anymore. Call me bitter, and here's why. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Catch that? Almighty, the Lord, the Almighty. Make no mistake who Naomi is blaming, who this Mara is blaming, with a bold statement of blame. And we read, so Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, or sometimes you return, Ruth the Moabitess, don't forget Ruth, she's a Moabitess. Her daughter-in-law with her, who returned from the country of Moab, don't forget, they're coming from Moab, and they came to Bethlehem, there's the fifth reference, at the beginning of the barley harvest. Oh, so again, Naomi, Mara, one of the chosen, one that knows all the God stories. It's the Lord. It's the Almighty. It's the Almighty. It's the Lord. But there's this turn in the story that came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Next week we'll see, when we look at the end of the story and we talk a little bit more about this, the scene of Bethlehem and some of the stuff that happens before this story, something that we know that's going to happen after this story. But there's just something about this story that even when we get to the end, and it's it's got a good ending, but it's not a happy ever after ending. Because again, Naomi's husband is still dead. Her two sons are still dead. She has a grandson now, but she has no idea what God is going to do with that grandson and the grandson after that and the grandson after that and the grandson after that. So at the end of the story, not too many years from the end of the story as we read in the book of Ruth, Naomi's going to die. Ruth is going to die. Boaz, who we'll look at, who's this character that comes into the story, he'll end up dying. But faith in the God of the Bible doesn't die. There at the end of the book of Ruth, that Ruth doesn't know and can't see in the future, that Naomi can't know and see in the future, yet the author of the book of Ruth says, something's going on here that's bigger than what Ruth and Naomi could have ever imagined. I end the message asking these two questions. How vast is God's warm grace? Again, God's warm grace is all over this 4 little chapters of this book of Ruth. I can't tell you how much this last month preparing for this series has meant to me, and how much I'm looking forward to just giving this last week's message, this week's message, next week's message, just on this little tiny story in the book of Ruth, because I see so much grace over this story. When all hope was gone, God brings hope. And then this question: how vast is God's warm grace in and through Jesus for us? If God can write Ruth the Moabitess into the story and give her words that we are still thinking about and meditating on and wanting to maybe somehow be our own words, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. And that someone like a Naomi, a Mara, can say the Almighty, it's the Lord, the Almighty. And God is still there when the story is coming to an end. How vast is God's warm grace in and through Jesus for us? Because Jesus is in this story long before he's born in Bethlehem. He's in this story when he is born in Bethlehem. He's in this story when we sing, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem." He's in our story. He wants to be in our story. Sometimes you're not going to see how it is that he's in this story. But if you start having eyes and imagining, he wants to be in my story. He wants to be in my story. He's in my story. He's in my story. You will start experiencing the grace that so many around you are experiencing. The grace that I know I'm experiencing. And I don't know the rest of my story, but I know Jesus is with us. He's with you. He's with me. So we're going to continue to sing that he is with us. He is with us. He is with us. Would you stand and pray with me, please? So Jesus, long after this story is written, we read in the Gospel of Matthew in the first chapter, in the opening verses, that you come from the line of Abraham and from the line of David. A few verses later, we read that a part of your ancestors are Boaz, who is in this story, Obed, who is the grandson that is born. Then from Obed, there is a man by the name of Jesse that is born. He's there in Bethlehem. That Jesse will grow up and he'll get married and he'll have 8 sons. And the youngest son, his name is David. And we know, Jesus, that you are in the direct line from King David. So Jesus, you're all over this story. And even though now we're 2,000 years, 3,000 years from the story of Ruth, you're still writing yourself into our stories. So Jesus, write your vast, warm grace into our hearts, into our lives. We ask and pray it, Jesus, in your name. For you are a great, great God. And help us. We pray these things in your name. Amen.